All right, welcome to Pyrotechnics, a podcast brought to you by Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine. Issue 104 is available still, but you can't get it online because we've actually sold out of hard copies. So if you do want one, it's WH Smith's and McCall's. We do have digital copies though, so get yourself over to fireworks-magazine.com and buy yourself one of them. I'm your host for today, Peter Arnett, and joining me is also our deputy editor and walking knowledge encyclopedia of metal music, Mr. Dave Cockett. Welcome, Dave.
Hiya, Pete. Thanks a lot.
And for those of you who also watched the teaser trailers we put out and are watching this, you will notice as well that it's a video one, which means we have a special guest with us. He is knocking it out of the park with his band Threshold. He's also one half of League of Lights with his lovely wife Farah. And he's just launched his third band as well, Oblivion Protocol. So a very busy man, but we're very glad to welcome Richard West. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Pete. Very nice to meet you. Nice to see you again, Dave.
Hi, Rich. From reading your autobiography, what I want to do is to sort of take you back to your childhood, to the early days. What was it really that got you into music and got you sort of thinking about pursuing a music career?
Well, probably the charts. I think the minute I discovered the UK Top 40, I was just hooked. It became my religion, end of the 70s into the 80s. And every Sunday night I'd be tuning into the radio, scribbling down the charts and making my own version of the charts in the order that I like the songs. And I just, from that moment, I thought, I've got to be doing this. This is my life. I've got to be making music. I've got to get in the charts one day. But I came from a very musical family. So I was already playing piano, played a bit of, I think probably cello by then as well. And I started writing a bit. And I don't know really where that came from. I'm too young to remember. But I think a musical family, I guess. Both parents played the piano. We had two pianos in the living room, so you could play duets. That was kind of cool. So I guess it was in me from an early age, but it was really the charts that got me hooked. From that moment, I didn't care about anything else.
So was it as a pop career you initially thought of?
Yeah, that was kind of what I was hearing. I mean, the charts back then, you had Rainbow and Status Quo and Pink Floyd were getting in there along with all the usual pop acts. So I hadn't really differentiated between pop and rock, I don't think. And when I was writing a bit of all of it, even a bit of prog when I felt ambitious as a young kid. So I didn't really hear a difference. I didn't know about genres. I just knew what I liked, And when I discovered bands like Genesis and Queen, it suddenly the world just opened up, and it's like, okay, there's more to this than the 3-minute format, and that was just the world I wanted to go into. So I kind of hit. I'm not quite in that world, but I'm kind of on the fringes of it. So I did all right.
Mm-hmm. So how did you actually get started in the business? I mean, it's one thing to be a kid playing piano and listening to the charts and dreaming that one day you're going to be up there on stage. But how did you actually get started?
Just, one of those right place at the right time, I guess. I moved near to London to get my first job, and I just got to know some local musicians and started hanging out with one of the guys. He had a little studio in his back garden, and that became my kind of apprenticeship in a way. So I was down there in the evenings and weekends, and ended up in a band with him and a few others, and one of them was Carl Groom. So that's how I met Carl, and Carl seemed to be in every other band there was in the area. So I ended up touring with a band called Shadowland, progressive rock band, back in, I think it was 92. And after that, Carl asked if I was interested in joining Threshold. So it just kind of one thing led to another. It was just, that's how it works sometimes, isn't it? You just hang out with the right people and things happen.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you toured with Shadowland. Now I remember Shadowland. They were a metal band.
No, very prog.
Am I thinking of something else? I'm thinking of Shadow Keep, possibly.
Shadow Keep, yeah.
Carl produced later on, I think, possibly. But from coming from that sort of pop career side, or even listening to things like Rainbow Status Quo, to move to something like Threshold, that must have been quite a bit of a culture shock originally.
It was, because the band we were in before Shadowland was one called Mercy Train, and we were kind of rock pop. And at the time, one of our clients at the studio was a friend of Simon Cowell. So we started producing pop music for Simon Cowell's label back before Simon was famous. And I ended up writing quite a few pop songs for Simon's acts. So I really thought that was where my career was going. Would have been a bit more lucrative too as well. But that was where I thought I was going. And then that door closed. And then suddenly the next door to open with Threshold. And they couldn't be further apart, it has to be said. And probably my whole exposure to metal was White Snake and Rainbow and Status Quo. You know, I didn't know the really heavier side of music back then. I went in there, I mean, on the back of Shadowland, really. It was progressive rock. So I had Clive Nolan from Arena was fronting it. Ian Salmon, who was in Arena for a while as well, on bass, and a guy called Nick Harridance on drums, along with Carl on guitar. So I was in there just to play keys because Clive wanted to sing rather than play keys. So I took all of that kind of the big chords and the big widdly solos and transferred that into Threshold. So that was what I've been asked to do, you know, bring some prog to the metal. So I didn't really need to understand too much about how the metal side worked, as long as I could bring in the proggy bits. So that was how I got in the door. But to be honest, I thought it was like a 3-day gig. I thought I was going to go to the studio, put down a few keyboards, and then go back to writing pop music. But before I knew it, they'd asked me to kind of be in photos, and they wanted me listed on the album, and suddenly there was a tour coming up. So without really realizing it, I found I'd joined the band. And 30 years later, I still seem to be there.
You're obviously the driving force for the three, you know, the great bands that we mentioned in the intro. How do you maintain your focus when working on material for each, you know, of the bands that you're in? And how easy do you find it to switch between the styles? Because obviously League of Lights has got a very more poppy sound than, say, Threshold. Oblivion Protocol, obviously similar to Threshold, but different in so many ways. I mean, how do you keep that focus?
I can't write for more than one at a time. That's probably my one rule. It's just really hard because you get a whole sound and a vision and a template in your head of how you want the thing to sound, and you just try and follow that vision all the way through, or you end up with an album that just goes all over the place. But I've tried it before, trying to write on 2 projects at once, and it's just a nightmare. You end up with pop songs in Threshold and metal riffs in League of Lights, and you probably hear it in some of the earlier albums. But it's okay, but it's not quite what I set out to do. That's probably the hardest thing, you know, because I think with most musicians, you could sit down, you could do a jazz album, you know, I could probably have a go at a classical album. We love music, we understand music, but to make a specific project, I mean, Threshold's a good example. We could all do 100 things, but when we get together to do Threshold, we know it's prog metal, we know it's got the big choruses, we know it's going to be catchy, we know it's going to have a certain style of riffing, and it's all kind of unspoken, but we kind of understand what it is. So when we get into Threshold headspace, we know that's what we're going to do. League of Lights was trickier because I didn't know what it was. So I think when I met Farah about 27 years ago or something, we were doing pop rock because that was what I did. And then when we tried to do our first album, we thought, well, that's not going to sell, is it? So we went more towards the symphonic metal side with our first album. And it just didn't really suit us. It was fun and it's kind of quirky, but it didn't really suit us. So we ended up drifting back to pop rock, and that worked quite well in the end.
Do you find yourself quite a disciplined person? I mean, like you said, you've had to, you know, you can't write more than one album at a time. Are you disciplined enough to, you know, you obviously do it, but have you really had to try being disciplined to do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty disciplined. I'm quite hardworking. I'm up most days at 5. I'll try and get some stuff recorded or written before breakfast. I'm one of those guys. And it's just in my head all the time. Quite often we go for a walk and Farah says, "What are you thinking about?" I just give her a look. It's like, "What do you think I'm thinking about?" I've got a symphony going on in my head. And she's wondering why I haven't spoken to her for 20 minutes. It's always going on, you know. So at the moment, even while we're talking, I've got the new chorus for one of the new Oblivion Protocol songs going around in my head. So if I appear distracted occasionally, I'm thinking, "Oh, that's a good bit."
Where do you get the inspiration for your songs? I mean, they're never vanilla. We never hear a song just sort of saying, you know, "I love you, baby, yeah, yeah, whoa, whoa," coming from you, you know. So, you know, there's also many nuances and so many clever double meanings in your lyrics as well. I mean, you make it sound so effortless, you know, but is it behind the scenes when you sit down and think, right, I'm going to think of this lyric? You know, do you really struggle with them, or do they just come naturally? How does Richard West write a song? Break it down for us.
It's funny, probably when I was writing for Time Hell back in the 90s, they were the "I love you, baby" sort of lyrics. And they're kind of easier, you know, they're kind of generic. But I think when I started writing with Threshold, I had John Jury as my kind of role model in a way. So John was the original bass player. He wrote all the lyrics back in the day. And he wrote some phenomenal lyrics. You read something like 70s End, you don't even need to hear the music. You can just read those lyrics and it just moves you. Absolutely brilliant. So he set the bar pretty high. So when I started writing for Threshold, I thought, well, that's what I've got to aim at, you know. So I started thinking in that space, you know, thinking philosophy and environmentalism and politics and, you know, deeper things than love and dancing, you know. And I think that's really how I started off. So I owe it all to John, to be honest. And then when he left the band, 2002, 2003, it then fell to me. And so I had a bit of practice by then. So the first album I wrote with Carl was Subsurface, and I just picked up really where John had left off. And that ended up being, again, a bit of politics, a bit of philosophy. And it's to answer your earlier question, is it easy? No. Do I love it? Yes. And I just work at it all the time. And I when you write something, you can sit down and write 8 lines and you know you like 3 of them. And it's just the other 5 are going to niggle with you. And they go around your head until you change them. And so you can either be disobedient and sit on them for a few weeks and they just annoy you all the time, or you just sit down and keep working until you come up with what you want. So it's part inspiration, part hard work, I think, probably with most artistic endeavors.
Changing tack slightly then, Richard, one of the things I found fascinating reading your life story was that there was a point where you decided that you were going to give up life in the UK, and you and Farah actually up to move to the Czech Republic. What prompted you to do that? Why? And ultimately, why did you come back?
So, long story short, I guess. At the time, I'd been working like 9-to-5 job for about 10 years, I think, and really just wanted to do the music full time. And things were starting to pick up, and I had a little side hustle going on doing CD-ROM multimedia design for a few record labels back in the day. Remember when you used to put your CD in and stuff would come up on the screen back in the olden days, before DVDs and before the internet was really fast enough to do that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'll take that and the music, and maybe I could just about scrape a living. And we looked at the Czech Republic because that's where Farah's family come from. And it was so cheap to live in. I think my house, I just bought a house and it had gone up by 40 grand, nothing to do with me. It's just the housing market was starting to climb. And we found for that 40 grand equity, we could buy a 5-bed house, you know, with a big garden and beautiful views, just outright in the Czech Republic. Don't think you can anymore, but you could back then. So we found this gorgeous house. We went and bought it and just set up for this absolute dream life where we just do music and grow our own food and have this idyllic time. And it was the worst year of our lives. Absolutely horrendous. Just you know, it's a beautiful country. I mean, Dave, you know the story because you've read my book, but beautiful country, and I would go there in a heartbeat. Absolutely adore the place, and the people are wonderful. But we just had one of those years, you know. The builder ran off with all our money. Our car got stolen. Our house, there was just one disaster after another. And in the end, we just came back, and plus all of the CD-ROM work dried up, so I didn't have any money coming in. So it's funny, I was chatting to Darby, the drummer from Oblivion Protocol, a few weeks ago about this, and he just looked at me and said, "Do you think the universe was telling you you were in the wrong place?" I thought, really, 20 years, I'd never even thought of that. I thought, yeah, probably was. There were so many things went wrong. It's like, okay, back to England with you. So we came back about a year later, kept the house for a few years, but finally managed to sell the thing. And I miss it every day, I have to say. It was a beautiful place to be. But I think we're supposed to be in the UK. It seems to work over here.
Now, as we mentioned before, obviously, you know, Dave's read your book. I've got it on my wish list. Dave, let's do a shameless plug for Richard's book. Let's hold it up. So there you go. It's one of those things available from every good bookstore, also on Amazon as well. So people, you know, even if you're not a fan of Threshold, buy it. It's a superb book. Dave's told me all about it, full of great stories. So, you know, did you find it, though, a cathartic exercise writing this book? Is it one of those kind of exercise a few demons moments? Or was it just, you know, again, was it a hard work doing it? Did you have to be super disciplined to write a book? And did you find it easier to do that than write a song?
It was very similar, actually. It was a weird one. I think the reason I started doing it, I was spending a lot of time looking after my dad, who sadly passed away last year. And he just used to love sharing his stories with me. You know, he's in his 90s and he just, nothing he liked more than going back and reliving his stories. And one of them he'd written down. So I took all of his words, and he had all these old slides he'd done during this. It was an expedition he'd done in Canada back in the 50s. And so I'd taken all the words and the pictures, and I made it into this hardback book for him with one of these online services. And I'm so proud of it. It's like, I know I've made loads of records, but I was just as proud of this book, and giving it to Dad. He was so happy as well. And I just thought, I wish he'd written down more of his stories. And I think that's what started me off. It's like, well, I should write down some of mine then. And then it didn't help. Sorry, it did help that I knew a friend who was a publisher. So he actually wanted to publish the book, which always helps. But he said, just write down a couple of bits and send them over. We'll see if there's anything in it, you know. So I just wrote one story, one anecdote, and just shaped it up like I was writing a lyric until it just read nicely, good punchline at the end. And I read it, I thought, oh, that's quite good. So then I wrote 2 or 3 more, and I thought, okay, this is quite fun. I'm enjoying this. And I sent them off, and the publisher loved it. So that kind of got me started. And then after that, it was just one story after another. And I just kept on trying to remember good stories. I think if I'd have tried to write it from birth to death, not death, close to death, it would have been really hard because you just get through all these really tough, chewy bits. But because I went through and just chose all what I thought were the good bits, I ended up with just a bunch of really nice stories. So after a while, I thought, well, I'll just put them in order and then start to fill in the gaps. And that's where it got a bit trickier. That's where the hard work came in. But cathartic completely. But what I loved, I think more than anything, was just reliving all those chapters of my life. You don't really sit down and do that, do you? You might remember the odd tour or the odd night here and there. But I got to go through and relive my whole life again. And it was quite fun. I think I enjoyed it more the second time now.
Were there any stories that didn't make the book, Richard? Any stories for a follow-up or something like that? Is that something you've considered?
I considered the follow-up. Quite a few people have asked me when's the next one coming out. I think, well, hang on, it took me 50 years to live the first one. Well, how soon do you want the next one? I've got to live a bit more. But I'm still writing stuff down, so I'm taking notes. So you never know. In 20 or 30 years, there might be a sequel. But stories that didn't make it, I think more than anything, I just try to keep afloat. You know, I wanted it to be my life in Threshold, just with the kind of the stories that made me who I am musically, and that was my brief. So yeah, there's lots of non-related stuff that didn't go in, and lots of private stuff that didn't go in because it's private, you know. But I just wanted to keep that narrative really, so it flowed as a story. And I didn't really want to make it a. I'm not going to tell you who, right? But a friend called me up a few weeks ago. He heard I'd written a book, and he wanted to pick my brains about writing a book. And he said, look, I've got so many bones to pick with so many people, and he just wanted to put it all on the page. I thought, mate, if that's why you want to write a book, just don't do it. Because not only will everyone hate the book, you'll lose all your friends. So just don't do it. So I was just conscious with mine. I wanted anyone who read it to feel happy that they'd read it. I didn't want anyone to think, well, that's not right, that's not fair, or anything too contentious, you know. I think in 30 years of being in a band, you're going to get some contentious stories and some places where people don't necessarily agree with the narrative. So I try to just kind of keep it friendly, so whoever's going to read that is going to be happy. So that was my brief, and I've not had any complaints yet, so I'm hoping that worked.
So moving forward to Threshold then, as you said earlier, you've been in Threshold 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, Threshold, they're an established name, something people recognise as they've got a string of albums out. So the first thing that most people will still think of, oh, Richard's in a band, they tour regularly, they release albums regularly. Rest of the time, he must be on his backside counting his millions. Do you sort of want to fill him in on the sort of real life of being in a band like Threshold?
Yeah, I think there are no millions. I think it'll probably be the first obvious thing to say. It's a funny thing, isn't it? You always think all bands are doing it full time, they're all millionaires and they're all doing great. And that's true of the 1%, but it's just not true of everybody else. I think less so now than it ever was. You know, I had a 10-year period where I could do music full time, but really the last 10 years has been not that way. And I've had to have some part-time work just to keep the money coming in. Things like Spotify coming in, you know, they've changed the musical landscape. Great service, great to be able to hear whatever you want, whenever you want, but you know, it just doesn't pay musicians. So everyone knows that. And touring's getting more expensive with fuel costs, and vinyl's getting more expensive with manufacturing costs. So it's like everything's kind of working the wrong way for musicians to be millionaires anymore. So real life is, yeah, I work a job. I spend every spare possible waking second thinking about music, writing music. So I probably still put in a good 5-day week in music, just in between the other work that I do.
A 5-day week as a job as well.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned the complexity of your lyrics, but do you have problems sometimes when because you've had quite a few vocalists in Threshold, obviously, rest in peace to Mac, but you've got Damien Wilson and obviously Glyn at the moment. Do you find yourself having to sort of alter the style when you're doing your lyrics for the songs on the vocalists at the time? Because obviously there's, like on Dividing Lines, there are some lyrics that you can sort of think Damien could sing that, but obviously Glyn sings them as well. And there's other ones you think, no, they're definitely Glyn. There's no doubt about it. When you write a song, do you have that sort of conscious in mind when you're thinking, I've got to sort of tailor make this to obviously, Glyn's style of singing?
Yeah. When I'm writing the lyrics, especially the melodies, I'm hearing the guy singing it in my head. So I knew with songs like Hall of Mirrors that it was going to sound perfect for Glyn because I could hear him singing it already. And even when I sang the demo, I tried to sound like him, which I can't at all. But I just knew in my head this is how it's supposed to sound. But as you know, with the history of Threshold, we keep changing singers. So you'll write an album in good faith for one singer and find that another singer ends up singing it. So it doesn't always work. And it's interesting, Damien's got a very different vocal style to Glyn and Mac before him. And so you do find you need different shapes and melodies, even just a different vocal range. Glyn's, got a much higher voice than Glyn's got. Sorry, Damien's got a higher voice than Glyn. So yeah, you have to have that on your head. And I remember when Mac first joined the band, it took me 2 or 3 albums before I could really hear his voice in my head and know that I was writing for him. So I think you hear it really on Subsurface and Dead Reckoning. It was just that time in our career where I really understood Mac. Mac really understood what I was trying to give him, and it just worked really beautifully for him. And he just sounds phenomenal on those records. It's a tricky skill, and I found the hardest one is actually writing for me. Because all the stuff, we haven't talked much about Oblivion Protocol yet, but writing for that, I'm just so used to writing melodies that work for great big singers. And then suddenly I come along and sing, and I'm not this great big singer. I've got this softer, proggier voice. And that's my biggest challenge now, is learning how to write for me.
But what we're going to do now is bring you one of Threshold's songs. This is Silence, taken from the superb Dividing Lines album. Hope you can see it there from Threshold. So here we go, Silence.
Silenced, a million spoken voices, their choices stolen without violence, stopped by unrelenting forces who never saw their worth, who never saw their souls as they were. Thought of freely, in fury, a statement of defiance. Blocked, no judges and no jury. From many to a few, to everyone we knew. We real at the scale of the world they created, lost at the cost of the world they deleted. The shouting of a dream was nothing but a scream inside, as everyone was. Silenced, the past is just a memory. Nostalgia is all that it's cracked up to be. Stored like some forgotten history, left together dust. They were loved and they were lost, and they were silenced. They knew that it was coming. They told us we'd reached the end of summer. We stand in line with arrows to beat the new machine, but slaughtered by the bullets in the form of T's and C's. We real at the scale of the world they created, lost at the cost of the world they deleted. The shouting of a dream was nothing but a scream inside. Yes, everyone was silenced. Yes, was nothing but a scream inside. And after the show of compassion is ended, we'll hear the coda of what they intended. The shouting of a dream was nothing but a scream inside. Yes, everyone was silenced. Yes, everyone was silenced.
Okay, Richard. Now moving on to League of Lights. I understand actually it originally started as something to push as a solo career for Farah. Well, how did it develop on from that?
Well, very early on, I was just, back in my pop writing days. So I was just writing songs, and we thought, well, Farah's a singer, so we'll just put those two together. So we were going to call it Far West, and then the Far West Project, and we tried various ideas. And then I think she was reluctant because it was a duo, and she was very aware she didn't want to just pretend it was just her. So we ended up with the League of Lights title. But that happened over, goodness, a good 10 years, I think, while we were just faffing around trying to get ourselves started. We tried various management companies and tried various band layouts, that sort of thing. It's just one of those projects. I think every musician's got them. Some projects just hit the dirt and work straight away, and others take a bit of building.
I mean, the debut album really was recorded as a band. Yet since then, it's become it's basically you and her, or more or less. Was that something that was intentional? Was that something that circumstances dictated?
Yeah, I think probably circumstantial. Like I said earlier, we originally intended to be a pop rock duo, and then we thought to get somewhere we need to have the band, and then we can get out on the circuit, that sort of thing. But it just never happened. We didn't get the label interest, and then we put out this song Forever in 2012 with Glyn Morgan, Threshold vocalist, guesting on it. And that was kind of our last ditch attempt to try and get some label interest for this particular project, because we thought we put in so much and it didn't go anywhere. And then we put out Forever, loved the song, thought it went really well, still no label interest. So at that point we thought, well, hang on, we got to do something different then. So at that point we thought, well, let's just go back to doing what our first love for this project was, which was the pop rock. So you hear on the album, In the In-Between, our second album, there's still a few songs that were kind of written with the heavier band in mind. There's Fox and Shockwave that are just slightly heavier and more menacing, like Hammer. And then you see the rest of the songs are kind of gearing more towards the pop world again. And then for our third album, Dreamers Don't Come Down, it's basically a pop album. And it's got a band sort of feel. It's got a kind of an 80s ethos to it, but it's basically pop. And it's where we just felt the most comfortable together, I think. Farah's not big into the prog metal side. So it was just a nice place that we both were very happy. And I think especially for that album, because we made it during lockdown. And, it could have been a time where everyone got very insular and depressed. And, I know a lot of people found it really hard. But for us, we just made this album and we've just had the best lockdown, I think, of anybody. We just loved it. We just found our zone and we were just, writing new songs every couple of weeks. And it was a fantastic time.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it was quite a distinctive sound shift from the first album to in the In-Between. Yeah, you then come out. I mean, like a track that not to preempt what Pete's going to put, we're going to play later. Kings and Queens. You look at the video for it, for example, and the atmospherics of the song itself. It's as big as anything that you've done with Threshold or Oblivion Protocol.
Which is funny because it's all done mostly around piano and a soft vocal. So it's got that it's got the epic imagination of Threshold, but without the epic sound of Threshold. And I think we want to do more of that in the future. It's a very quirky song. I remember when I first put it forward for the album, And we listened and we thought, well, that's just bonkers. It's got this big kind of Queen-like chorus that comes in. We thought, well, that's not work. And then as we made the album, we realised it was probably the strongest song on there. And making the video, great fun. Bit of dress up and fire looks amazing. And I think that's kind of where League of Lights is. That's kind of who we are. Pop with some quirk and a bit of extra imagination, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's been a sort of studio-based on and off thing for as long as I can remember. But actually, you've played a couple of shows. What's your sort of experiences of sort of walking on stage and doing that for the first time? And is it giving you taste to sort of take that forward and do more of it as League of Lights?
Yeah, I think we will. We did our first gig. It was during lockdown. There's a festival in Germany called Art Rock. And we got on the bill there. And we went there with a full band. We had Root Jolly from Within Temptation and a couple of guys that we've known for ages from the Threshold world playing bass and drums. And we did a gig as a 5-piece. And we just loved it. It worked really well for the music, even though it's kind of poppy, it kind of worked well having that real band feel behind it. And we thought, yeah, let's do more of this. And it just didn't, I think because they're all from different countries, it gets really expensive very quickly to bring them all in and do a show. So we thought, well, actually, obviously we're getting it economical. So we thought, well, we'll just try one show as a 2-piece. And it worked. It surprised us. We put together visuals. Thought we're not going to be interesting enough to get with just the 2 of us. So we'll make sure every song's got video. And it just looked great. We were lucky. We did our first gig in the Bordereye in the Netherlands. And they've got this, I think it's an 8-meter screen. So we couldn't have landed on our feet better. We had just the 2 of us in this massive screen with these great visuals. And the show went really well. It's kind of surprised us that people liked it and they were happy that, we had the pre-recorded drums and guitar and everything. And then we got offered Fusion Festival in the UK. And we thought, I don't know. I don't think prog fans are going to go for that. Pre-recorded music for prog fans. Not sure. And we did it and it went down really well. We had this line. It felt like the opening night of Star Wars, the line of people coming to our merch desk at the end. It was really genuinely surprised us. We didn't see that coming. So we thought, okay, the prog crowd doesn't seem to mind us. Maybe we'll do a few more of these. So we did a show recently supporting Lifelines, and that seemed to go okay as well. So yeah, we're lining long way of saying yes. We're lining up some more shows for next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming from that you're absolutely committed to it, continuing going forward. How far are you down looking at a new League of Lights album?
Honestly, right now, I would love to be making a new League of Lights Threshold and a new Oblivion Protocol. But as you know, I can't do all 3 at the same time. And my head is absolutely full of the follow-up story for Oblivion Protocol. So that's what I'm working on. I can't guarantee that's what will come out next, but that's what I'm working on at the moment. Violet's kind of busy with other stuff in their life at the moment, so it kind of works well. But I really hope we'll do another League album. We've got so many ideas of where we want it to go. Somewhere between the kind of the sophisticated pop sound of the new album, but with some of that quirk of Kings and Queens. I think I'm kind of excited about that already. And shut up and stop distracting me. My brain's already slipping away from Oblivion there. But yeah, absolutely love to. It's just life's not long enough, is it? I love having 3 bands, 3 projects, but it's just they all take so long. And I kind of hope we get to come back for another go because I've got so much more I want to do.
Right then, Dave, do me a favour. Let's have another shameless plug. Another song coming up for you from, there we go, the In the In-Between album from Richard and Farah. This is the aforementioned, as David said, Kings and Queens.
From all that we know, all that we've seen, you will be king, and I will be queen. So this is a test of senses and sins. Nighttime has passed,
and training begins. And all that we are, all that will be, follows from now, in what we believe. And when we have passed through the between, you will be king, and I will be queen. From the earth to the sun, to the stars and far beyond. So it is done. From the heart to the tongue, to the head that overcomes. So it is done. And when we have passed through the between, you will be king, and I will be queen.
And that was the wonderful Kings and Queens. So, as you rightly pointed out, we haven't spoken much about Oblivion Protocol, but that's going to change now because we're going to go on to this section. So, you rightly worked out that during making of this album, Threshold, Legends of the Shire, you hadn't finished with this world that you created, and you wanted to explore it further. But how did you feel when you sort of pitched this idea to the guys in Threshold, and they basically said, "Well, yeah, we've done that. We're not kind of interested in doing a follow-up." How did that make you feel? Did you think, okay, maybe I'm going to shelve the idea, or did it actually make you more determined to do it, but obviously in a different way?
When I pitched the idea, I was delighted because they all said yes, actually. So when we started making the album, it was actually going to be The Fall of the Shires. And so lyrics for songs like Haunted and Hall of Mirrors and Silenced and Domino Effect, I could go on, are all actually written to be part of the Fall of the Shire story. But it was during the making of it that I think a couple of the guys just felt a bit constrained. It's like, well, actually, we've got some other stuff we want to do as well. So I think at that point we thought, well, if we haven't got a meeting of minds, then that's fine. We'll just put that down and we'll make it something else. So we kept all those songs I mentioned because they kind of work as standalone songs anyway. But then at the same time, I withdrew a couple of songs. So there were tracks, the full part 1, the full part 2, which became the start and end songs on the Oblivion Protocol album, were actually written for Threshold. But they didn't make sense on Dividing Lines without a story because they're telling the story, So at that point, I was disappointed, I'll be honest. I put a lot of time into the story and invested myself in it, So it felt a bit disappointing to lose that. But I had this story I wanted to tell, and I thought, well, I kind of like those 2 songs. So you've seen it in the book, but I just thought, well, I'll make it for myself. You know, I genuinely had no intention of anyone hearing it. I thought, I'm just going to make a record for myself. I'll keep it fairly short. I'll just make it a single vinyl sort of length. And I thought, what I'll do, if I like what I've done at the end, I will go to one of those pressing plants that let you press one copy of a record, and I'll just have one. And I'll slide it in my record collection, and that'll be my secret album that nobody knows about. And that was the genuine plan. So it was actually quite a nice way to write, because I remember, so I'm going to go off on tangents, but when I was a kid, I tried to paint, and I wasn't very good at it. And I was always worried about, oh, people think it's rubbish, and all the usual stuff you go through when you're young. So one day I just sat down to do a painting, and I thought, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing this. I'm just going to paint for myself and just enjoy it and love it. And it's the best thing I ever painted by a mile, because there was none of that peer pressure at the end. And this Oblivion Protocol was very much the same, because I really thought it was just me. I wasn't even going to play it to Furry, you know, it was just my little secret project to do in the background. And then it came out so well, I ended up getting signed. So before I know it, it becomes an actual album that gets out there. But forgotten the point of the story now. Got me going around in circles. But I really enjoyed doing it, put my heart into it, and actually ended up working out quite well, I hope.
You mentioned obviously this, and you got signed. You got a deal with Atomic Fire, and just released the album. What did it feel like stepping from behind the keyboards to stepping up and being the guy that everybody was focused on?
Honest answer.
Having worked with people like Glenn and Damien and Mike.
Honest answer, just between you and me, is I was waiting for them to come back and say, of course you have to get a proper singer, but they never did. So I got to stay. It was freaky, because I know I haven't got that big voice. I'm not a rock singer. I wouldn't pretend to be, but I kind of felt I did okay. So I figured if the label are happy to sign it based on sounding like that, then maybe it's not so bad. But it feels weird, I for 30 years, and I found this actually making a video for This Is Not a Test. Suddenly I'm standing in front of a band, they're all lined up behind me, and I've never had that in my whole life. It was just the weirdest thing. I thought, I'm so used to being behind them, checking them out, making sure they're happy, making sure the drums haven't fallen over, making sure all the cables are working. I'm that guy. I'm just checking it's all going well for everybody. And suddenly I'm at the front, I can't see them. I think, are they pulling faces? Have they walked off to have a tea break? I've just got no idea. You've got suddenly this trust in these guys behind you. But once I got over that barrier, I kind of liked it. It felt, weirdly, it felt like I've been doing it for years. So I'm kind of hoping I get to go and do it live as well, because I quite like the idea of seeing what that feels like.
I'm going to slip in a bit of an extra question here, but I know you've explained this, to other magazines and press articles, but for our readers and listeners, how did it come about that how did you choose who you wanted in this new band?
I thought, well, I've got to have real musicians on there. It's fine to have programmed drums on a League of Lights pop album, but I can't do that on what's going to be effectively a prog metal album. So I thought, I've got to put a real band together for this. And as tempting as it would have been to use Threshold guys, the whole point is it's not a Threshold record. So I thought it's got to have its own set of musicians, got to have an identity. So I just sat down and thought, who are my three favorite friends who are musicians? My favorite drummer, favorite guitarist, favorite bass player. And I picked them, and they all said yes. I was a bit surprised, to be honest. I mean, Root Jolly from Within Temptation, I know I've worked with him before, but to have him on my record, just phenomenal. Darby Todd on drums. He was out on tour with Devon Townsend at the time, and he's just an amazing drummer. He seems to just play with everybody, and so having him on the record, just wonderful. And then Simon Anderson on bass, who probably less people know. He's in a band called Darkwater. I think he was in Pain of Salvation for a while, but I was in a project with him years ago called Audio Plastic with Dec Burke, and his musicianship is just off the charts, absolutely amazing. So I thought to hear him playing bass on my record would be quite exciting. And if you listen to the album and just filter out everything other than the bass, you're still going to enjoy it, because he's just amazing what he's done on there. Absolutely beautiful.
Again, it's no secret that you want to make, in essence, the trilogy, the third album, to go along with the other two. How's that going? And what happens to Oblivion Protocol afterwards? Because obviously we know you as doing the follow up to the Shires, and obviously this third one as well. But have you got plans for after that?
No, I couldn't possibly plan that far ahead. you just don't know what's gonna happen, do you? I'll probably have another band by then. No, I really hope it's one of those things that just keeps on going. I would love it too. You know, I look at bands like Queen and you think they were the same four guys all the way through, you know, through their ups and downs. I know they had difficult times, but I just love that it was the same guys. So I kind of hope I can do that with Oblivion Protocol. You know, we're in it for the long term and it'll be the same four guys in 30 years' time. That's what I'd really like to happen. So yeah, I've got the follow-up to Fall of the Shires, which I'm writing at the moment, going really well, absolutely loving it, absolutely obsessed with it, filling my head every waking minute. That'll probably not come out for another year. So I hope I'm still as excited in a year's time. It's one of those things you've got to stay excited on a project for a long time to get it finished. After that, I kind of thought I was going to do another part of the trilogy, like the fourth part of the trilogy. But I'm not sure now. This one feels like it might be the conclusion. And then maybe we can just go back to making normal records or something. But yeah, very much hope we'll keep on going. And like I said earlier, I hope we get to do some live shows as well. It's very much on my list of things to do. I need to get out from behind those keyboards, see what the world actually looks like.
How's it been received by Threshold fans?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. There's obviously some people say, oh, it should have been done by the band, which is nice, but generally been really receptive, really nice when you get that. I think people were already excited about it because it was a sequel to Legends, and there's quite a lot of Easter eggs in there, as you know. There's a lot of little references back to the Legends album, so it feels like even though it's a different band and a different singer, it feels like you're kind of still in the same world. And to be honest, writing the albums, it's actually just as fun doing those little Easter eggs and those moments as it is writing the actual songs. So I've just been working on that this morning before our call, actually, and I'm quite excited about it. Got all these new little bits to put in there.
Now, you talked earlier about legal rights and how basically you couldn't really get anybody interested in either signing for a record deal, getting you out on tour or whatever. Well, this seems to have sort of happened overnight. Now, I get that obviously it's a follow-up to a Threshold album, an established band. But you talk about live dates. I'm getting that actually it's a fairly strong reality that this is going to happen.
I don't know yet. Honest answer, as we're talking, I'm talking to my agent and we're just looking to see whether there's any interest out there to do it. It's that same old thing where you've got people living in different countries. So you can't say, oh, we'll go and play the local club for a couple of £100 because it's just going to cost thousands just to pull the thing together. So we're just looking at what's the art of the possible at the moment. But very much hope so. I think also the album's 43 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah.
Can't exactly do a headline set yet. So the most likely thing would be we'd go and do a few festivals. So we're kind of steering in that direction. See if we can find some festivals where the other guys aren't busy doing another festival at the same weekend. The usual problem with musicians.
Here's a random thought. Stick Oblivion Protocol before Threshold.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say it, but goodness, I'd be exhausted. I'd be so stressed by that. So yeah, not on my list at the moment, but you never know. You never know.
I mean, again, I'm interested sort of in the lyric side of it and the way that you obviously form your music. So we've said that when you had the different vocalists with Threshold, you obviously had to tailor-make what you did to the vocalist that was on there. With the Oblivion Protocol, is that the same as well? Because obviously it's a similar sound, but not the same sound as Threshold. So when you now sit down with Oblivion Protocol in mind, do you have to really sort of try and focus it that way? Because like you said, you wrote the original in respects to play with Threshold, and then obviously it went to the new band, and you've only had sort of like the one album with new band, and you said yourself, like with Mac, it took a couple of times to get his voice in your head, and now obviously you're the bloke who's providing the voice. How difficult has it been in that respect and writing this new album to sort of like have your voice in your head writing for you and your new band?
It's actually surprisingly hard for this second album. I think I've lost that magical I'm writing it for nobody moment where I just, no one's going to hear it. I can just do what I like. And now I'm suddenly in the public eye. So every time I write something, I'm thinking, oh, people are going to hear this. It's a very different dynamic. But also just learning about my voice. It's like I said, it's not one I've studied before. And I'm discovering, apart from the 100 things I know it can't do, I'm discovering the bits that it does better. I'm just trying to learn that and see how to apply that to my melodies. And it's kind of a weird thing. It's a bit like I don't know, teach yourself to do a call like this. You look at yourself on camera and think, well, there's 100 things I'm doing wrong, but I have no idea how to train that out of me because that's just who I am. And it's kind of the same with a voice. I'm trying to work out at the moment what works for my voice and what doesn't, so that hopefully the next record will sound even more appropriate for me to sing. But I've completely forgotten the original question now, which was off topic again.
No, it was basically how you were writing this for you, as opposed
Yeah,
to writing for someone else.
Well, I mean, the full part 1 and 2 I'd already written. They were written for Glyn to sing, and hopefully they come across okay. They're softer songs anyway, so they kind of work. The rest of them I wrote for me. They weren't written for Threshold anyway. So I was already working in sort of the direction I wanted to go. So I was bringing the melodies a bit lower than Glyn's voice. I was not going for the big, heavy, crunchy riffs quite so much because they just bury me. I haven't got the powerful voice to fight above them. So I was kind of tuning guitars down a bit more. I was going for more atmospheric, wider keyboards just to leave a bit of space in the middle for the vocal, which is something I learned from working with Farah, because when I give her voice room to shine, it's just gorgeous. If I clutter it up with heavy guitars and big drum fills, it just doesn't give her the space. So I tried to take that learning on to Oblivion Protocol as well. So it's kind of threshold-y, isn't it? But it's not threshold. It's more atmospheric. It's a bit more proggy. It's a bit more relaxed, a bit more orchestral in places. I just did a few things that worked better for me than would have done for Glyn.
So if you haven't got this beauty, I suggest you go out and buy it. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, we were blown away, both Dave and I, when we heard it, and you'll be as well if you listen to it. So again, you can buy these. Good record shops, Amazon. Just go out and buy it. Support these acts. So here we go with Forest in the Fallout from Oblivion Protocol.
Oblivion Protocol is now underway. It's too late to turn back now.
Still see the picture of all that we were into. Not shaken or stirred, thought we ruled the world. We always meant to. But time can turn the tables, and facts become the fables. Who'll tell the story of our faded glory when we're no longer able? And it's time to fade away. We're forests in the fallout. We're desolate and worn out. So hide us in the corner. Forget you ever saw us. Lost in the past, from the force of the blast till the prophecies are born out. We're forests in the fallout. And the night grows into day. So what we knew was reason is now considered poison. The atmosphere changed, nothing old remains, and honesty is treason. And all this devastation, from child to town to nation, won't fade to black, I'll bring the good times back, won't help us find salvation. All our dreams will fade away. We're forests in the fallout. We're desolate and worn out. So hide us in the corner. Forget you ever saw us. Lost in the past, from the force of the blast till the prophecies are born out. We're forests in the fallout. We were darkened by the first wave. The second took us down. So cordon off the test site and hide us underground. And some things can't be undone once you light the fuse. 'Cause actions all have outcomes, so be careful what you choose. We were darkened by the first wave. The second took us down.
Okay, just a sort of couple of general sort of things to finish off with then, Rich. Something that seems to have caused quite a stir of late, although it's not a new thing, it certainly seems to have come to a head in the last couple of years, and that's the sort of idea of sort of venues and promoters taking a percentage of band merch when they play gigs in their venues. I'm assuming that Threshold have experienced of that. If so, what are your experience of it, and what do you actually think of the practice?
We haven't really had it much with club shows, to be honest. I think generally it's more with festivals for us. You get to a festival and they'll charge anything from 10 to sometimes 35%, which is quite a lot. It's fine. You know, I understand festivals are hard to put together and they've got to get their economics right. So if you know that's the deal, then you know that's the deal. What we tend to find is if the deal's not very good, then we just don't take merch. So it does have a bit of a backfire on it. Certainly if you're flying over to a festival, to fly over a box of merch costs quite a lot of money in the first place. Yeah. And then the logistics of then getting that flown back again. So quite often, if it's not viable, we won't take stuff anyway. But I don't, it's controversial, I guess, but I don't really mind if venues want to charge money, because they've got to make money too. And I know you hear about on a Rolling Stones tour and they're charging a fortune and everyone's making millions. We're not in that world, you know, it doesn't work like that. You've got festivals desperately trying to scrape to make things work. But we had a festival we were supposed to play a few weeks ago in France, and they got cancelled the week before because the venue went into administration. So, you know, at every level, everyone's suffering. The venue's just gone down. Now the festival's gone down. Now all the bands have lost money as well. We're in that kind of world. So if a venue needs to charge a bit of money for merch, I don't mind, you know.
One of the things that we discussed recently, we had a quote from Sir Brian May and Gene Simmons about the use now of AI in music, artificial intelligence. Obviously not quite the Terminator situation at the moment, but they were obviously worried about the use of artificial intelligence in music. You know, the fact that it could spell the end of groups, spell the end of singers, especially voice sampling and all the stuff that goes with that. I mean, as an artist, what are your thoughts on the use of AI in music?
Well, I just saw in the news this morning about they're going to bring out some service where you can sing and it'll come out with somebody else's voice. And, you know, I've heard AI of even Freddie Mercury, Michael Jackson, there's quite a lot on YouTube, where you can hear it's the same vocal tone, but it's not the same vocal performance. You know, there's no emotion, there's no drama. And with both of those things, you need that. So just because it's got the tone doesn't make it sound like the singer. But I'm sure that'll only get better after time. And I honestly, my first thought when I saw this story this morning was, I've got this great Queen song I wrote years ago. I'd love to sing it and put Freddie's voice on it, see what it sounded like. So that's my view of it. That sounds really fun and really creative. Will it destroy the industry? I doubt it. I don't think so. I mean, how many singers are actually going to license their voice to get used that way in the first place? I'm not sure it'll be something you can actually do. But we'll see. I think creativity is about being creative and not having any boundaries. And so, although there's some worries on that, I think there's got to be some good applications too, and it could be really fun.
So I see the biggest potential drawback is that the obvious ultimate conclusion of this is that AI takes over and people and musicians are just completely taken out of the equation. So the AI comes in and says, right, I'll write a song that sounds like the Beatles, or I'll write a song that sounds like the Rolling Stones, or I'll write a song that sounds like Threshold. Don't need them, don't need to pay them. So we'll create this song, and the whole thing is AI generated. There's no human interaction at all. That's the sort of Terminator scenario. But ultimately, surely that's what we've got to be heading towards.
It's hard to know, isn't it? I'm sure to a degree. I imagine in the short term it would just be done on a quirky kind of commercial level where it's just a bit of novelty interest. You know, I think if everyone gets replaced by that, I don't really see that coming. I don't think so. Does anyone want that sort of world?
I would hope not.
No. And would you? I mean, we love going to live music, don't we? What are you going to go and do? Go and watch a ABBA style avatar of the band instead? I think we all prefer the real people. I'm sure AI could write a Threshold song better than me, but hopefully the fans will still prefer a human version.
I very much doubt it.
Me too. So what happens if we get a video of or a song of Richard West singing "Let It Go" from Disney's Frozen? You know, what would your reaction to that be if it suddenly plastered itself up on the internet?
That'd be hilarious. I would laugh. I think
I'd pay good money to see that.
I think the worry is the security issues, isn't it? You know, if you can morph your voice into someone else's, we've all got bank passwords based on our voice. You know, suddenly I think that's where the worry comes in. But having fun creatively, I think it's just about having fun. I'm not too worried about that.
Richard, it's been an absolute joy to have you on the podcast. I knew it would be, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well.
It's been great. Nice to talk to you both.
So I'm going to let Dave say goodbye now, because we're going to wrap this up now to allow Richard to have the rest of his day free for himself. So, Dave, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pete, and thanks for taking the time out of your day, Richard, to talk to everybody.
My pleasure. Really been fun talking to you both.
And like I said, you know, buy the albums that we've shown and buy the book as well. It all goes to supporting a great artist and great bands as well, and keeps music up and going, which is what we want to do. So I've been your host, Peter Arnett. Thank you very much for joining us on Pyrotechnics. But until next time, take care, everybody. See you all later.
All views heard in this podcast are from the individual and do not necessarily represent those of Fireworks Rock and Metal Magazine.